Hello and welcome to Spotlight Indie. I'm your host, Frasier Armitage, part-time robot, full-time nerd, and Flappy Guild. And joining me is my co-host, Alex Bradshaw. Alex, how you doing?
Yeah, good. Good. Very still reeling from many different things. Now, the most recent being the description of your flappy gills.
We never said flappy. Where did that
No, it
come
was
from?
loose.
I know, we said loose.
Yeah,
We said
yeah.
loose. Yeah, I thought it would be less ambiguous if it was flappy, but like it's fine. It's fine. I can be loose gills. I can be flappy gills. Give me, my gills are in a terrible state. Let's put it that way. Joining us is the amazing Adrian M. Gibson. How are you doing, Adrian?
I'm doing well, bud. Reeling from things that I myself brought upon you both. So,
Mate,
but I'm doing well. Yeah.
That's what it's gonna be. Just it's my Gill era. You've brought it on. It's yeah. So yeah, I'm glad you're doing well. I'm glad you're doing well. Adrian, if you don't know, is the author of Mushroom Blues, and if you're thinking, what are they talking about? Go and check out last week's episode with Adrian. We had a great time chatting about his author journey, about his indie journey, and we really got to the heart of who he is as a person, which I think is stunning. And this week,
with a quite the climax for the episode.
Yes,
like watch to the end.
Watch to the end.
And if you're watching this after you watch to the end of the last one, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Aslan forgives you, Adrian. It's fine.
I don't need Aslan's forgiveness. I need that. I don't know whose I need, like Lucy's, maybe. I don't know.
Maybe. So this week we are going to be proving that there is no such thing as a stupid question. This is our regular segment where we will answer questions that come in from indie authors. They can be as random and crazy as possible, because when we start out as an indie author, we've all got random, crazy questions, and quite often we feel a bit silly asking them. So we hope that in this segment we'll be able to have a chat about a question that will help you and as in your author journey, but also it might be a question that you've asked and you may be a little bit too shy to ask it. So hopefully it will be something that will be particularly helpful to you watchers who are in that situation. This week's question is, how have you used your... Oh no, that's not. This week's question is, for the first time with zero editing, how can I use my non-bookish skills to help my career as an indie author? And we thought this would be a great question to ask you, Adrian, because you have tons of non-bookish related obvious skills. You're a tattooist, you're an artist, you're a graphic designer, you are a podcast host, professional interviewer. Like you're just like, I've talked way too much without asking anything. So I'm now going to go into a question, which is, which skills have you found to be useful? And is there a crossover that you found with all of these different things?
Yeah, I mean, man, there's so much to cover here. Maybe let's split it up into book creation and book marketing. I think would be like a good way to frame it. So in terms of like book creation, there's just a lot of different stuff that I was able to apply to Mushroom Blues. So from what Frasier said is like, I do have a background in art, so that encompasses like tattooing and graphic design and illustration. Like all these illustrations behind me are my own drawings and tattoo designs. So I was able to incorporate basically like my artistic background and experience into making Mushroom Blues stand out as much as possible from like an aesthetic and visual perspective. Because as like a person who loves reading, I think a lot of publishers, and this is not to like hate on trad in general, and I will also include a lot of indie authors in this as well, they make their books, especially the interiors, quite bland and unappealing. And really, like, this is an opportunity for you to be able to enhance the experience that a reader has with your book. So it's really important to think about like, okay, how does the cover look? Yes, that is like the main thing. because if anyone's looking at your book on Amazon, if anyone's looking at your book online, probably they're seeing it like at a thumbnail size. And yes, they are judging your book by its cover. And so if your book has a terrible cover, people are going to assume that terrible aesthetic applies to the quality of the story itself. And so they're that much more likely to avoid your book and just completely skip over it. And so when it comes to cover, like think about that from the outset. Like, who am I choosing as my cover artist? I was actually talking to Jeff Brown last night, who's a cover artist and really amazing. For anyone who's following like Broken Binding special editions, Jeff has done a ton of amazing artwork for them. And we were talking last night until way too late because we haven't caught up in a long time. But you can have amazing cover art. That is one step, yes. But then if you pair that with terrible typography and cover design, it's the same thing as like a bad cover makes people judge the interior of the book, the actual quality of the story. Bad typography and bad cover design makes people judge the quality of the art itself and therefore the rest of the book. And so you can have amazing art, and if you pair it with terrible typography, people see the terrible typography, and basically, like, by comparison, the cover art just gets completely overshadowed by the terribleness of the typography itself. And so it's really important just to sort of, from my background as a visual artist, like I have a very keen eye for design and basically like spatial sort of aesthetics and things along those lines. So it's like I put a lot of thought into how do I want to design this book? You know, how do I want it to look like from this big and from this big, right? And so it is really important for authors to understand, like, don't shirk on that kind of stuff. You know, it is really important how your book looks. And that also goes to the interior. Like, as indie authors, we have the opportunity to be able to give readers something more. You know, it's like we're not restricted by page count. We're not restricted by, you know, you can throw in like 20 extra pages into your book and nobody's going to be like, oh man, you know, it's like if you have a map, if you have an in-world glossary, if you have a QR codes there asking people for very kindly like to review your book or rate it. If you want to basically say like, you know, I have a podcast, here's a QR link, scan this and you can find out more about my podcast. You can take an extra page in your book to dedicate to that, you know? And it's like, I have that stuff filling my entire book. Like, I think probably like the first 15 pages of the book is not even the book itself, right? Like this is the title page. So for anyone watching, it's like you can make your title pages stand out. You can make your chapter headings stand out. Throughout the book, I was able to commission art from an artist in Romania. And so it's like there's like full black and white 2-page spreads throughout the book of different scenes from the world. There's just like a ton of different things that you can do to just like enhance that reader's engagement and their investment in your world and your characters. You know, it doesn't have to just be like cover text. You know, you can really elevate things because we as indie authors have the opportunity to elevate things. And if you're a debut author in trad, like no way any publisher is going to give you that kind of treatment with your debut novel. And even then, if you're down the line, like still mid-list and you're not like a bestseller, still not likely that they're going to put that kind of treatment into your book. And so as indie authors, like we can essentially like raise the standard for what people can do with their books on the outside and on the inside, you know? And then for the reading experience as well, like formatting is a huge part of it, like very important. And for me, you know, like just because of my background in graphic design, like I was able to, and my familiarity with programs like Adobe Illustrator and Adobe Photoshop and programs like that, I was able to basically like learn on my own how to use Adobe InDesign and like design the entire interior of my book. And so this is another thing. It's like if you have that skill set or if you have that intention to learn these kinds of things, you can also save money and make your book beautiful. Because otherwise, you know, if you want your book to look good, you know, like you open up a book and it's like, you know, how is the page laid out? What kind of font do you use? How easy is it for people to read it? How much spacing is there between each line? all these kinds of things actually affect the reading experience, and it can make your book, just as much as the story is able to affect the pacing of your book, so too can the typography and the layout of your pages affect the pacing of a book. Like go to your bookshelf and look at a thriller, I'm thinking of someone like James Patterson or Ruth Ware or David Baldacci or what have you. Look at how much space is in between the lines of those books, and look at the size of the font, and it will be completely different from a fantasy book. There you go, David Baldacci, right there. Yeah, exactly. So look at how much actual like space is on the page occupied by black ink, and then go look at a Brandon Sanderson book and compare how dense that is in comparison, because this, just like the formatting and the design itself affects the flow and the basically like the way the reader is physically, tangibly engaging with your book from one page to the next. So like as a designer, I put a lot of intention into thinking about how can I make this experience as visually and sort of like aesthetically pleasing for the reader, but then also how can I make the typography and the layout work in conjunction with the story itself to give people a sense of like the pace that I want them to have. Because it kills me when I see books like indie books that are formatted in Microsoft Word or something like that. It's just like, oh my God. I know not everyone has these skills, but
as you said, that stuff about Word, like, you occasionally see the people, you get the physical copy and then it's not like justified. So it's sort of, like to justify the text for anybody who might not know would be to, have it flat. Kind of square against the page, and you kind of see it's not justified, and it does affect how you kind of read the book, because it will kind of do that automatically in an ebook. And as you were talking about InDesign there, that is sort of the standard for the publishing industry.
Yep.
But I also just want to mention, for anybody who wants to look into that, I've actually used an open source kind of equivalent called Scribus. So InDesign is obviously an Adobe thing, so there'll be, I assume,
that's part of like a subscription model, but it's like, and I don't think a day goes by where I don't use one of them, whether it's Premiere Pro for the podcast, Photoshop and stuff for graphics, InDesign for designing books, Illustrator for like logos and stuff like that. But like Scribus is one, Atticus is another. Another one that you could use is Vellum. Vellum is basically really, really good for ebooks. It's a one-time purchase, so you can get it and basically like, kind of budget that towards like your entire writing career, essentially. And you can format an ebook in there, but you can also format physical books as well, and it'll look way better than it does in Microsoft Word. It won't look like absolutely stunning or anything like that, but it will look very solid compared to Microsoft Word type formatting. And there are free options, there are paid options, but just some things to keep in mind in that regard. So,
and I think it's really just the way you've described all of that there, I think is really interesting, that especially as indie authors and indie creators, you have an opportunity not just to follow the trends of whatever the crowd are doing, who are basically trying to fit as much as they can into like, and
as few pages as possible.
Yeah, exactly. Keep the cost down. Whereas, with the stuff that you've got in Mushroom Blues, looks amazing. I've got a paperback copy of Queens of the Weird by Tamandra Whitecastle, and she's got like kind of runes, like kind of patterns on the chapter headings as well. So you do just get these options, and it doesn't cost. I don't think it costs much more or any more to have those pages. Like,
no, I mean, basically, like if you're including graphics in your book, it's not gonna change anything. Like a page is a page. Within a physical book, ebooks might charge you might lose a little bit on ebooks just based on the file size of your ebook. So if it exceeds a certain file limit, then the Amazon will basically like take off a small percentage. Usually it's like cents, like literal cents, as like a delivery fee because you've got a chunky ebook or something like that. But it's negligible, and for me, it's like I'd rather have that artwork in there. And that small percentage that I would be earning if I didn't doesn't really make up for it. And then on the book marketing side of things, everything that I've done with the podcast has basically been like a lesson in like progressive lessons in marketing, in terms of like okay, here's this like project that I started from zero. Where can I publish it? Which platforms? You know, how do I sort of like get it in front of people's eyes on YouTube versus using social media like Instagram and X and whatever else. So it's been really helpful for me to understand the value of these different platforms in relation to certain types of content. And so a podcast is best going to be advertised just by keeping keeping the pace up and continuing to publish episodes in the basically like in the orderly manner that you establish, to say like, I'm going to release an episode every 2 weeks. And if people come back in 2 weeks and there's a new episode, they're like, this person's consistent. And that's awesome. And so it's like you start to develop trust with listeners based on the fact that you can consistently deliver your product in the form of a podcast every single day, whatever your time frame is that you basically publicize. So it's like, if you're the kind of person who's like, no, I'm going to put it out every week, and then you start like skipping a couple weeks, you know, and you have no excuse for it. You don't say like, you can put out a quick episode that's basically just like, you know, I ended up in hospital or something like that, and people will be very forgiving. But if you start to lose the flow of your release schedule and the consistency that listeners want and expect, then you start to lose their trust and you lose their engagement. And in the case of books, it's kind of like, it's not a direct one-to-one comparison. And in indie, there's a lot of flexibility, but it's like, if you say like, I'm going to release a book on this day, you know, and you're essentially creating like a marketing machine behind that to say like, this book is coming out on this day. People are going to be really disappointed if you're like, sorry, it's coming out next year, you know? Not looking at any particular authors out there who aren't able to sort of like keep up with reader expectations and whatnot when it comes to releasing books. I don't want to throw any shade at anybody, but it's kind of like a similar thing. It's like, if you're marketing a certain expectation, readers will pick up on that. And then if you completely fail that expectation, fail to meet it for that particular person, it's more likely that they're just not going to bother looking at your stuff again, right? And so when it comes to marketing, like, I was very intentional with Mushroom Blues to be like, the book is coming out on this day. I created a whole book tour behind it, you know, sort of like this like marketing machine, this big push of going on podcasts and doing interviews and live streams and guest posts and different kinds of stuff like that, like cover reveal, map reveal, all kinds of things along those lines. And so all of that, every single thing that I was doing was kind of like pushing this expectation of, you can expect this book at this time, right? And even though my launch was kind of messy, like I ended up, you know, like I met that date with my ebook, but then like this was my first time dealing with KDP and Amazon, and like I had a bunch of issues with formatting that it took me a while to figure out. And so I'm like, I ended up releasing my paperback a few days later. But in the end, it's like, people are going to forgive you for being like, yeah, just like wait a couple days, you know, or something like that. You do have flexibility in that sense. You don't have to be like so strict or so rigid to be like, it comes out on this day or else. If you do need to push it back for any reason, you know, be intentional and be honest and be genuine about it. But if you are putting a ton of effort into, you know, my book is coming out this day, then try to hold true to that. And people will sort of attach their excitement to the fact that they can go and buy this book on this day. And then, you know, basically after you put a book out, like, marketing's not done. I think like launch is sort of this anticlimactic moment where you're expecting to be like, you know, like confetti and champagne and whatever else, you know, like it's just, that's just not the reality of it. And especially as indie authors, it's not like, you know, we hit buttons on our computers and things happen. It's not like, oh, I'm going to go to, you know, my release party and like, you know, your publisher's sending you on tour and all this kind of stuff. So it is really important to think about, not only like how do I project sort of like the expectation of my book beforehand and then around launch, but I think afterwards is even more important. And this is kind of where the podcasting has helped me as well, is just kind of like sustained exponential growth, right? It's one thing to just like release a book out into the world and then just like do nothing with it. There are some people that can do that, but they're in like a more privileged position where they probably have a bigger back catalog. They probably have an established readership. People who are like, oh, so-and-so's got a new book out. Awesome. And that author doesn't necessarily have to put as much of a push behind it. But when you're a debut author, especially in self-publishing, it is important to like have that visibility like before you launch and then around launch, and then just like continue it after launch, and find a really healthy, balanced way to incorporate marketing and visibility into your sort of like post-launch plans, essentially. And like one of the best things that I did was probably signing up for SPFBO, because that was just sustained visibility that I didn't have to put any effort into. The only effort I had to put in was filling out a Google form and hitting send, and then the rest of it was kind of just like this self-perpetuating sort of like blogger reviewer driven cycle, right? Until, it lasted like 10, 11 months or something like that, which is way too long in the end of it. But like I ended up like getting to the very end and then tying for first and then losing in a tiebreaker and getting second place, which I'm still super, super happy about. But those are kinds of things where it's like that can kind of be incorporated into your marketing plan in the same way that I'm looking ahead at like my podcast and thinking, who are the guests that we want to invite? Which are the books that are coming out? How does that fit into our release schedule? Do we want to do a panel, or do we want to do a two-parter with an author? Or like just this month in July, we're doing Indie Appreciation Month, where we're having like 4 indie panels talking about different aspects of being an indie author. And so it's kind of like, okay, how does that fit into our schedule? How are we going to record those? All this different kind of stuff. So it's kind of like looking at your schedule and your routine and what you can manage, balancing your life and your creativity, but also the fact that you put this book out there and you want people to read it. Because when it comes down to it, no one's going to read your book if you just put it out there and don't say anything about it. You need at least some kind of push for the snowball to start rolling. And eventually it will get to a point where it starts rolling on its own inertia. But if you don't give it that push yourself, nobody else is going to do it for you. Like as an indie author, it is, it is on you. It is on your shoulders. You are beholden to your book if you want it to succeed. And if you don't put that energy in at the beginning, then the end result is not going to be satisfying for you. So it's really important to set your expectations of like, what would make me happy about what this book is able to achieve? And what do I have to do in order for it to get there?
It's really, really wise. I love that. I think that there will probably be some people who are listening to your experience, Adrian, and are thinking, it's great that Adrian's got all these skills, but I'm not an artist. I don't know very much about this and that kind of thing. But the thing that I really love about what you've incorporated is that you haven't just used your skills to advance your author career and your books, but you've also used your passions, because everybody knows you love mushrooms, right? You don't look at mushrooms and think books, but you found a way to make it happen, right?
Right.
So I think if there are authors out there who maybe feel like they don't have the skills, is there something you're passionate about that you can put into your marketing?
Yeah.
In the same way that Adrian has, look, all these pictures of mushrooms around him, right? How many weeks did the picture of the drawing of one of your characters just like stay by you and on your podcast, like for everyone to see every single week? Like,
right, yeah.
If you love cooking, make a recipe, use that in your marketing. If you love gardening, use that in your marketing.
Take some photos of your book out in the garden, show people what you're gardening, but like also kind of you can incorporate your book into that as well. Especially if it's like, who knows, like maybe you wrote a cozy fantasy and it's like you want to show your cozy fantasy out in the garden with the garden that you're tending to, and also like the book that you tended to and created. You can combine these things, and it doesn't have to be super complicated. And at the same time, like what you're saying about those people who don't necessarily have certain skills, I think it's really important for indie authors to think about what skills do I have and what can I realistically achieve with those skills, right? And everything else, can I afford to delegate that? So it's like if you can't draw or paint or something like that, you can't make your own cover, how much can I afford to delegate this and hire somebody to do that for me, hire a professional to do that for me? Same thing with editing. Like most people aren't able to edit their own books, or proofread them, or whatever stages you want to go through. And so you have to figure out like, how much can I allocate towards editing? And that can also apply to interior design for your book, like how the book is formatted. Maybe I don't necessarily have a ton of money to hire an interior designer. Therefore, can I try one of these free programs and what can I achieve with that? You know, or do I have friends or like family members who are able to help me out with that? You know? And so it's like a lot of it is kind of, it's just like entrepreneurial business management skills, unfortunately. And this is kind of what self-publishing entails a lot of the time, is a good business runs smoothly when the person at the top is not micromanaging everything. It runs smoothly when that person at the top is able to figure out like, what are the skills that I have in my personal skill set to get to the company to a certain point, and which things are either A, outside of my skill set, or B, not worth my time to continuously do every single day, or what have you. And so how do you delegate those tasks? Obviously, you're going to have to think about how money is involved in this equation. How much money can I afford to give to this person to do X, Y, or Z, right? And so it's really important to think about, like, if you're a debut author, or even if you're someone who's released multiple books before, maybe you've spent too much money those first times releasing a book, or maybe it's like you didn't shell out and you feel like you didn't put in enough to give your book the basically like the quality it deserves. You can sort of apply these lessons at any point in your career to think about, like, okay, as like a self-published author, an author in this equation equals basically like business owner, because you are a one-person business and all of your books are your products. And yeah, it's not fun to think about things in that sense, but still, it's not fun, but it's helpful. So how can you basically run your business in the way that is the most efficient way possible, while also still being financially viable? So in my case, it's like, I didn't spend a lot of money, but I have the skill set and I was able to invest the time in doing marketing and doing the book tour and doing the design of the front cover and also the interior and adding these extra elements in there. And, you know, hire like a case of delegation is like, I can't make music, but I really love music. Like, I was a music journalist, and therefore I asked two of my friends in Sweden, like, hey, you guys want to make an album for me? And they made an entire 8-track Mushroom Blues album, which I was able to like incorporate into the marketing. And I've continued to this day to like use their music with promotional materials and stuff like that. And so it's like, that's a case of, I have these two friends, like my best friends who live in Sweden, who have this really unique skill. Do you guys want to collaborate on this? You know, and it's not necessary. It's just an example. It's not necessary to make an album for your book. But if there are things that you feel are outside of your skill set, but are vital to the quality of this book or the presentation of this product, how can you delegate that? Who can you delegate it to? How much is it going to cost? And is it financially viable for you to do so? So there are like a lot of things to think about in that regard.
So would you say that some of the most useful skills you could acquire or try to develop as an upcoming and new indie author is not just the craft of writing, but also the art of business? Would you say that like business acumen is a skill that is essential for an indie?
Yeah, because the authors who I know who have reached the highest levels of success have treated publishing, I'm not saying writing, they've treated publishing like a business. and they're able to separate the craft and the creation of a story. And there's a certain switch that flips where you're like, okay, the story's done. I hand it off to my editor. I get it back. Now this book is ready. This story is ready to be converted into a product. And that's when the publishing mindset kicks in. And you have to think about publishing and marketing like a business person. You can't think about it like a writer. Otherwise, you're going to be floundering and just like, because like as writers, we're all over the place when it comes to the writing process. And that's not how you want to be when you're applying skills to business practice. It's like you can experiment for sure. And I think experimentation is a huge part of marketing. But at the same time, it's kind of like, you don't want to be like flopping around on your ass, just not knowing what you're doing and just like trying to figure it out. It's like you kind of do have to wear, it's like a lot of my author friends say it's like wearing multiple hats. One of those hats is being a writer, and the other hat is being an author. And so it's like in my head, a writer is the person who creates, and then on the other hand, an author is the person who publishes and promotes a book. So it's really important to think about like, what is your mindset and when, and how are you able to apply certain skills at certain times of the whole publishing process?
Yeah, it's like you can't imagine going to like the CEO of a like Fortune 500 company and being like, okay, so how did you get here? And then being like, I just pantsed it. Like, you just can't imagine that, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's
it's like go to like a venture capitalist, and he's like, let's pants this this
this new
startup.
venture. Yeah.
And it's like, no, man. There's like there are really applicable lessons that you can draw from certain industries. And I think having a bit of familiarity with business management, a bit of familiarity with sort of like administration and accounting, all those kinds of things like budgeting, to go in with the accounting is really important, because it's like I've met far too many authors, especially in the self-publishing space, where they're like, I've never made the return on my investment for X number of books. Some of them are even like, I'm still paying off like the cover for book 1 with like book 5, which for me is like, that's not good business practice, unfortunately. And so I was able to, just because of like my skill set and everything that I knew going into this process of like, I can do that realistically. I was able to basically reduce the overall investment in this book to about like, I think it was like around like 2,500. So it was like 1,500 for cover art and like 1,000 for editing. And I was able to recoup that in about 8 weeks. And so from there, everything that I earned, since like in 8 weeks after the book was released, I was already in the black. And so what I was able to do was to take everything that I earned from that point on and to reinvest it into the audiobook. And then I was back in the red. But now I'm at a point where I've already earned back the $4,500 that I spent on the audiobook, and I've made 3,000 more than that. So I'm back in the black and already earning more, right? And so it's kind of like, how can you approach your book before it's even released and approach the costs and figure out what is the best sort of like financial investment that I can make in these different aspects of my book, such that I can realistically recoup my investment in like a reasonable time frame. It's probably not going to be 8 weeks. That was really fast as I came to learn. But like a reasonable time frame of being able to recoup that investment, and then like an audiobook is an even bigger investment that is less likely to give you a return, but can you justify that? And so these are things that you can think about at different stages, but definitely before your book is released and you're like thinking about the cover and you're thinking about editing, you're thinking about these different aspects of creating a book beyond just writing the story. Like, what can you afford? Like, budget this stuff out and basically come to a conclusion of like, I can allocate this much money to it. And what would you have to do in order to get eyes on this book and basically create a snowball of visibility that will keep the return coming and basically push you from the red right into the black.
How many of these skills that we've been talking about have you acquired as part of the writing journey?
I mean, like a good part of it I learned from tattooing, because I was like a self-employed, like freelance tattoo artist for 6.5, 7 years. And so a lot of like this business practices stuff that I learned from tattooing as well. And that was another case of like, here's the craft, here's tattooing, here's the art form, here's the business side of it. How much am I investing in supplies, equipment, and you know, like disposables and things like that, like needles, tubes, maybe my tattoo machine breaks down or I need to repair it or something like that. Can I repair it myself? That's something I actually learned how to do, is how to like deconstruct and reconstruct a tattoo machine, because I found it was more affordable for me to just buy a single part that wasn't working and be able to deconstruct my tattoo machine and then replace that part and build it back together again. And so there are different things that you have to think about that are completely separate from the actual act of being an artist or being a creative person. It's like the tattoo, like the illustration in the tattoo is one side of it, yes. But then there's also like business management. There's also biology, like how the art form applies to the human body and the human skin. Then there's also engineering and mechanics, like how does my tattoo machine work? And if things go wrong, am I able to fix it? You know, like where do I buy my supplies from? How much am I able to invest in supplies versus how often I use them? Which things are going to expire at what time? And how often am I tattooing in order to understand, like, can I use all of these supplies before they expire, right? And so there's all these different things that come into it that encompass more than just the craft.
Totally. I want to bring you in on this as well, Alex, because I think it's a really good question, I think, to expand a little bit and just explore for indies out there who may think, again, like, what skills do I have? You know, I'm right at the start of this journey. What kind of skills have you acquired from the writing journey itself and from being an indie author?
A little bit of the business stuff, probably not as much as I should have. Certainly listening to Adrian, but more, I would say, learning about the publication process and stuff like that. So talking about like the typesetting and things like that. So my typesetting isn't quite as involved as you know, the design process that Adrian's got, but I do, you know, make sure I was very keen to check the fonts and stuff and make sure that you know, I probably put more effort in than was necessary for a lot of people, but I was very careful about the font that I chose because I wanted it to evoke a certain feeling. So I wasn't, you know, a particular sans font or, you know, serif font or something like that. So yeah, the typesetting and stuff like that, which is, that's, you know, that kind of stuff that I've learned, and very basic kind of making it so that my social media posts don't look completely shit, you know, in designing them in that way. It's just little things like that. But yeah, I think it's important to be open to learning all of those different things, and also just, you know, as you're touching, as these answers have touched on, not looking just at what Trad is doing, Trad Publishing, because they have very tight budgets, and yeah, they can pay people to do X, Y, Z, but they're trying to hit the biggest market they can. Whereas you, obviously that's nice to do if you can as an indie author, indie creator, but you can also, your market is just smaller anyway, so you might as well try and do something that is going to really resonate with people. So like with, you know, the way that Adrian's, you know, done Mushroom Blues has been amazing to watch, because, you know, the mushroom in the book, like that was a great sort of thing to see across social media, and the album is amazing to listen to, and just like that's a great experience to sort of put that on, read the book as well. And you're talking about that, and you're collaborating with your friends over in Sweden. Like if you've got certain skills that can help you, like I can typeset a book like to a basic level, not to anything too crazy, but maybe somebody else can proofread your book, and you could do some typesetting. So you can kind of swap those skills, and maybe you are in a position where you could maybe like be a sensitivity reader, or for something, you know, for whatever it might be, a particular culture or disability or what have you. So thinking about your skills, not just in terms of, how they're useful to your book, but maybe how you could use them as a almost currency to keep the budget down, because then you can they can do the proofread, you can do a sensitivity read for them, but you don't have, it's not cost you anything. And I do think like when looking to your interests, like we've already kind of touched on, and how you can use that more of the marketing side, I guess. But like if you like baking or you like cooking or something, get a recipe, and maybe you could do like once a week, you do it, right, here's a recipe inspired by such and such character or a cocktail or something like that. And you can, because you're an indie creator, you're not beholden to what the other departments think should go in your book. So you can just throw that in the back of your book. Like, here's a, I've got recipe, or maybe that's your reader magnet, the thing people are signing up to the newsletter for, saying, well, I've got a 3-course meal that I've designed that for every chapter, here's an aperitif or like a cocktail, something you can have for every chapter. So you've really got a lot more freedom, I think, to open up to whatever interests you have as well as skills.
What I would love is do the aperitif idea, but then as the book goes on, make the text so it's like double letters, so people, even if they haven't drunk anything, they feel like they've got more and more drunk.
That's a really good point, though. Like, you can kind of like utilize the story itself to kind of inform the marketing. Like, my friend Herman Sternagel, he wrote a book called The Bartender Between Worlds, and part of his promotion for that was like, it's a book about a bar, and so he's like created cocktails for it and was using those cocktails in his promotion and had like the cocktails in the book itself. I think especially for like the special edition that he did on Kickstarter. So it's like you can find the cocktails and you have the recipe, basically like the recipes and like the instructions on how to make it. And so you can be really inventive with these kinds of things because, like you said, like sort of finding your niche in terms of your passions and also applying those passions to your book involves sort of like leaning more into your niche to say like, in my case, here's a mushroom book that's like noir murder mystery. That was something that I like leaned heavily into in terms of my marketing, so that my messaging was very clear to people about what this is and what they can expect from it. Right. And so they weren't like, expecting like a happy-go-lucky book. It's like, no, it's pretty dystopian. But at the same time, there was very little confusion as to what this book was or how it was messaged or like what people's expectations were. Some people still don't like it, but that's totally fine. It's like a lot of people bounce off the unlikable protagonist. That's totally fine. But nobody says like, I went into this book and there are too many mushrooms. It's like, of course, And I'm kind of applying that to the novella that I'm going to release later this year, which is about sort of like the in-world equivalent of a sushi chef. And it takes place after book 1 and before book 2. And so what I've done is like there are 5 parts to the book. Excuse me. So there are 5 parts to the book. And what I've done is, because it's about a chef, I created a 6-course menu so that when you start the book, you have the first course and you continue through each part and you have course 2 and you have course 3 and you have course 4 and 5. And when you finish the book, you can finally have your final course, the dessert. And so these are really interesting things that you can like apply, not just to sort of like enhance the story itself, but it's also like a visual sort of like element of the book. So whenever somebody starts a new part, they're like, oh, what's the second course going to be? Like, what's the third course going to be? And then they read the recipe and they'll be like, oh, that sounds really delicious, And it's like, this book is really messed up, but I'm also super hungry. And so it's kind of like feeding into people's different senses, because reading as an experience is like a pretty, 2-dimensional sensory tactile experience. Usually it's just touch and eyes. And so if you're able to incorporate other senses into that experience, whether it's with music, whether it's like imagery that like, makes them salivate or something like that, or makes them like viscerally disgusted or what have you, there are ways that you can kind of like elevate that while also playing into the genre and the niche that you've kind of like carved out for yourself with your book.
That's so good for book clubs, just to try out the recipes and then talk about how it went.
Can I read some of the dishes, and you tell me if you think that these are delicious. Okay.
The title's out now, right, Adrian? So we can say that this is
a murder most fungal. Is the name of my novella. Okay, so let's see here. I've got. So I'll tell you. I'm not going to spoil all the courses, but I'll give you the first two, and you tell me if they're delicious or not. Okay. So here's the first course. Fungal fin tuna roe wrapped in Kanoko Bay seaweed, served alongside a glass of Golden Orchard Premium Reserve somake. And somake is kind of
that fits in the world so well.
Yeah, and somake is like the in-world equivalent of like sake or soju, kind of thing. And then okay, here we got the second course, which is fermented bean soup garnished with roasted Kasuga forest wild mushrooms and fresh bean sprouts.
Yeah.
And
Someone's been watching the bear.
Dude, I love the bear so much. I even use it in my marketing. It's like I market it as the culinary wonder of Jiro dreams of sushi, mixed with the kitchen chaos of the bear and the explosive tension of Hong Kong crime thrillers is basically how I frame it. Here's the third course. I'm not going to spoil the rest of them. Fungal fin tuna, Mount Maitake salmon, and mold speckled sea bream uzimi. And uzimi is like the in-world equivalent of sashimi. So
mold speckled.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not sure I would want to eat the mold speckled, but
Yeah,
you know what?
That was the first bit that gave me pause. That was the first one. I was like, oh, maybe not that bit.
But so for anybody again, like who is listening to this and is thinking, okay, this is great, all great ideas, all outside the box. I'm not that kind of outside the box thinker. I'm just a pantser and I've just started writing. Don't worry, because the more you go down this process, the more you'll learn. When I started writing, I was just a pantser who is the most chaotic, scatty-brained person ever. But there are things you will learn and these skills you will develop. Just stay at it and stick with it and you will become proficient with it. I just want to finally, as we're answering this question, raise something that Alex mentioned about using your skills for others. Because you, Adrian, are such a pillar in the community, but you've been so kind in the way that you've used your skills for other indie authors, myself included. Adrian, for the past couple of books, has.
Can I get my perspective on this anecdote?
Yeah, go for it, yeah.
Frasier, I've done this for multiple friends, so it's not just you, buddy. Comes to me with his cover, very graciously sharing it with me before it releases, and me in the back of my head being like, you can't release it like this. And then in turn being like, let me try a different version for you. And so I've done this for Frasier with I think 2 of your book covers. I did this for my friend MJ Kuhn's sort of like writing journal called the Ultimate SFF Story Bible. And then this also applies to like I've done sort of like formatting and interior design for different friends and typography and typesetting and things like that. It's just kind of like it feeds into the perspective that I laid out at the beginning of this episode of like, be intentional about how you present your book, because that will go so far and it will take your book farther than it ever would have otherwise. And so it's like, if I see a cover where it's like, the typesetting is lackluster, or if I see that like someone's not thinking about how they want to do the interior design of their typesetting and inside their book, then I'm kind of like, my neuroticism kind of kicks in and says like, let me do it. Give it to me.
You're gonna get inundated with like people with badly formatted books now going like, oh, I'm just gonna send you an advanced copy, Adrian, see what you think. But like, you can't do it. He's mine. He's mine, people. All right.
I've got my friend discount. But if you do actually want to hire me, then you can send me an email to help you out with that kind of stuff. Yeah, like it's something that I think, just like Alex said, if you have a particular skill and you feel like you could help your friends elevate the quality of their story or their product or whatever it may be, whatever your skill may be, then it's always about like give and take. You know what I mean? It's like that episode of Friends with Joey. It's like giving and receiving and giving and receiving and, without the sexual connotations, of course. But it's like, it doesn't matter what your skills are. Like if you, obviously you're writers, so you read. And if you want to be able to help out a friend, you can always say like, hey, like if you want, I can be your beta reader or a sensitivity reader or what have you. And honestly, like as an indie, beta reading is basically the best replacement we have for developmental editing, because friends who beta read your book will tell you the things that aren't working. and that's essentially what a developmental edit is. And so you can skip over the cost of doing something like a developmental edit by having close friends who you confide in and who you know will understand your intentions with the story, to be able to give you essentially what is like developmental feedback. Maybe, like I have a friend whose wife has done like copy editing and stuff like that for companies. And so basically it's like, instead of getting an editor, he's getting his wife to do it, because she understands the story and she's going to be able to do a really solid line copy edit and proofread of his book. And so, and like he had beta readers, one of which was me, which I was able to give him more like developmental feedback. And so these are all the things that you can do to sort of give back to your friends and give back to the people you care about. Because at the end of the day, it's like, I don't want my friend to put out a shitty book. You know what I'm saying? So if I'm able to help them in any way possible throughout that process, then that makes me feel much, much better. And obviously, like, your friends will be super grateful for whatever you're able to give to them. And in turn, they'll be able to help you whenever you need it too, just depending on what their skills are.
I'm happy to share you with the community, Adrian. It's
Thanks, man. I'm not just yours, Jesus. My wife would disagree.
Oh man, I was, again, so many things. Self-restraint. This is being recorded.
Sorry, Holly.
Thank you so much, Adrian, for spending some time talking with us about it and talking through each of those aspects of how you've used your skills in your bookish career. It's really refreshing, and I think it's given us an awful lot to think about. So I really appreciate it and your insights. So thank you for being with us. See, there is no such thing as a stupid question.
There you go. And I'm very happy to share this stuff. And honestly, like, if anyone comes away from this with, a little bit more insight, like, I'm very, very happy about that. And I'm grateful to be able to share it with all of you. And obviously, like SFF Addicts, there's a ton of resources over there as well for people who want to learn more about different aspects of writing, and also in the Fanfatic YouTube channel with Frasier and I, like, talking to different authors. And yeah, I mean, we're just in a really good time right now where information can be disseminated in really bad ways, obviously, but then information can be disseminated in very positive and very uplifting ways. And so the fact that, like, indie authors can come into this experience not being completely blind, like so many of the people had to just like roll with like 10 years ago, the people who were like in the early days of self-publishing, just being like, see if it works, I don't really know what I'm doing. And now we're at a time where it's like, there are more resources than ever. There's more information than ever. There are more professionals than ever when it comes to cover artists and editors and people who are able to actually contribute to the process of making a book as high quality and professional as possible. So yeah, I'm just happy to be able to talk about this kind of stuff. I like talking about this stuff as well. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, mate. It's so good to have you and to catch up, and all of the best with the Murder Most Fungal when that comes out as well. It's going to be so cool.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, so go find Adrian, SFF Addicts, or on the website. What's the website, Adrian?
AdrianMGibson.com. Yeah.
Perfect.
You just like that, like AdrianMGibson.com, Adrian M. Gibson on social media. And then, yeah, Adrian M. Gibson, wherever you want to go check out Mushroom Blues. And yeah, and then SFF Addicts for the podcast. You can find that anywhere you want to listen or watch.
Awesome. Alex, where can people find you?
AlexSBradshaw.com or at social medias, all the usual places, and all my usual name.
Awesome. And spotlightindie.co.uk, at Spotlight Indie everywhere. Come keep checking us out. Spotlight Indie, we're here for the indies. We love you guys. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being here with us, Adrian. And
my pleasure, buddy.
And until next time on Spotlight Indie, we will see you then.
Bye, everybody.